Thank you for your profound thoughts, your incredible commitment to the city, colleagues, as we talk about areas where we may have disagreement, but we know that everybody's interested in serving our city.
Once again, that's Seattle City Council Budget Chair Teresa Mosqueda, trying to keep the process moving forward after some challenging news last week of an even bigger budget gap than the city was planning for. What are the options there? Does Councilmember Shama Sawant's people's budget have any impact on this process? And don't look now, but there's some ballot counting going on for the fall election. Well, we are discussing this and so much more here on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are my own. My co-host, David Croman, is a new dad. Enjoy that family leave, David. And in for him is Kevin Schofield, columnist for the South Seattle Emerald. With all the election talk this week, I have to ask, is it true that you were voted most likely to write wordy and nerdy news articles back in high school? He's taking a minute on that one.
No. That is not true. That is not true. Probably should have been true. But that never happened.
All right. Definitely most popular on this show. I'm voting you in, Kevin. Thank you as always for joining me. And thanks also to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. Make sure you visit them on the first floor of City Hall. If you are a listener, please do become a patron. Join at the $10 level and become part of our mug club. We only have 2 of these limited edition mugs left. You can get one if you join at that $10 level. We'll feature you as our mug shot of the week. This week it is Lynn with what looks like a steaming mug of green tea. Delicious. Thank you, Lynn, and thank you to all of our patrons. And a shout out from Converge Media here. The Washington State Homeowner Assistance Fund, the HAF, is here for you. Are you behind on your mortgage because of some problems related to COVID? Well, they got you. If you qualify, you can get up to $60,000 in relief. They have counselors ready to help out. They speak multiple languages. So give that hotline a ring, 877-894-4663, or visit WashingtonHAF.org. All right, let's do this. Time for Right Here, Right Now. Okay, so before we talk city budget, we got to talk elections here, Kevin. I want to track some of the results next week after a few ballot counts. But for right now, I wanted to talk about voter participation because I noticed, Kevin, you dove into some of the data dumps that King County Elections has been doing. What's going on here? Are we going to get to that 72% participation number they were talking about a few months ago?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, as you just mentioned, King County Elections came out in front and predicted 72% participation,
right,
which is below the 88 to 89% from the presidential election 2 years ago, but it's still really high for an election in Seattle. Mm-hmm. As of Tuesday morning, this morning when we're recording this, it is about 42.5% in King County as a whole and about 43% in Seattle.
Okay.
So are we going to get to 72? We'll certainly get a lot closer. There's usually a big drop of ballots, particularly Dropbox ballots on election day here. Mm-hmm. And we'll get some more trickling in over the mail over the next few days. King County Elections publishes some anonymized data about the ages of the people who voted so far.
What's up with the youngsters? This is a tough one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the youngsters are not showing up in large numbers. If anybody and the conventional wisdom here in Seattle is the youngs show up on last day. They vote on last day, and so I'm sure there will be a bump today.
Okay.
But as of yesterday, we haven't seen it yet.
That's interesting to see. And also in terms of how people are actually sending in their ballots. I know there was some concern a couple years ago when it comes to mailboxes and people were not happy with the U.S. mail or what have you. Is that trend changing? What's going on there?
Yeah, you may remember, Postmaster DeJoy 2 years ago was telling everybody, "Oh, I'm not sure you're going to get your ballots delivered if you send them to the mail."
Right.
And so, everybody is running to the drop boxes. Percentage of Seattle and King County ballots that came in through the drop boxes was just through the roof 2 years ago, and since then it's dropped back to normal again. So we're not seeing a crazy large number of Dropbox balloting. Something about Seattle. We all want to do it the last day.
We sign up late around this town. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is.
Coming back to the age thing for a minute, it is always interesting to see older voters tend to vote early. Mm-hmm. Right. And you can see that in just day to day watching the age statistics. You can see that they start out, I'm just looking at the numbers here in Seattle, a good 40% of the ballots on, two weeks ago when they opened up, the election and mailed out the ballots, on the first day, about 40% were over 65, and now it's about 18%. So that percentage of the ballots that are coming in every day is much less, the older ones. Again, it's not the younger ones so far. It is the middle-aged folks who are really sort of surging right now.
They sound like trouble. Not that I'm in that demographic, but yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I did want to ask you, though, you had another piece to this, Kevin, in looking at how the elections department is actually processing the ballots. And I thought that was very interesting. They're actually keeping up pretty well with the amount of ballots that are coming in.
Yeah, so they have to, because we do it all mail-in or Dropbox, they have to do a signature validation on every ballot that comes in. Right. And it takes them a little while. And, some number gets set aside because the signatures don't match or don't quite match. And then they have to go, some challenge process to see if they get that resolved. So some, sit on the side for a little while. But at this point, as of this morning, it really looks like King County Elections has done a good job of keeping up with processing ballots as they come in. The number of ballots is higher than a year ago. And it's much lower than 2 years ago.
I see.
So, but they seem to be keeping up. So we could get a big drop of actual ballot counts tonight.
Definitely looking forward to that. And we'll talk about some of those results next week. But we got to get back to the budget here, Kevin. The city council, if you haven't heard this already, folks, got some more sour news last week about the budget gap they're dealing with. Early this year, we were hearing about $117 million. Then it ballooned up to $140 million in August. Now it's $145 million. The reason for this higher gap, a decrease in tax revenue, plus inflation at a 40-year high, interest rates going up too. Kevin, help us get inside those numbers here. What do you make of this budget cap, and why is it increasing?
So there's a couple categories to think about here.
Yep.
One of them is what they call general fund revenues, right? And that's revenues that come in from a certain amount of property taxes and other taxes they impose, like at least in theory, the payroll tax and and the sweet and beverage tax that the city could decide to spend on whatever they want, right? Yeah. And then there's restricted use taxes. One example is what they call real estate excise tax, which is the REIT, which is authorized by the state. It's an excise tax on real estate transactions.
Right.
So when there are more transactions, you get more revenues. When there's bigger, and it's based on the size of the transaction. So every time an office tower in downtown Seattle changes hands, there's a big windfall. Yeah. And those don't happen very often, so it's hard to sort of they guess how many are going to happen every year, but they never know for sure. So
they're really not happening now. That's for sure.
If one comes in December, they get a big windfall at the end of the year. So it's really volatile and unpredictable. What they're seeing right now is the general fund revenues. The good news is it looks like they're going to end this year, 2022, with about $10 million more than they thought they were going to have.
Okay.
But next year, it looks like they're going to have about $5 million less than they thought they were going to have, and about $10 million less for 2024. The 2024 stuff, they're putting together a theoretical budget for that, but really next year is the one everybody cares a lot about.
Right.
And it looks like they're going to be about $5 million less than the last forecast they had, which was in August for this. Right. So they got a little bit more sort of in the bank to spend with that, but they're going to lose some. But the big problem is what they call, again, REIT, the real estate excise tax.
Yeah.
Because of higher interest rates, we've seen a lot fewer real estate transactions happen.
That's right.
Right. Which means there's a lot less real estate excise tax. That is going to hit them really, really hard over the next 2 years. Now, REIT is used for transportation projects. Yeah. It's used for infrastructure projects. And as of a change in state law made a year or two ago, they can use it for some amount of affordable housing. Right. Yeah. And they plan to, and every year the city plans to use all that money that they get in on that. So the fact that they're coming in like $50-60 million short on that is a big problem. That's a big hole because they were counting on that money to do transportation, infrastructure, and affordable housing projects.
Right. And now they have to figure out $64 million, the latest number I saw there. And and I guess just to move on with this, Kevin, I'm trying to figure out what the council does about it, because I look at, it was $140 million you're worried about. Now it's $145 million. $5 million doesn't seem like that much in a $7 billion budget, but this is something that is going to have an impact. It's actually going to push back or push into the future by a week the council's budget process. Can you talk about what the council is looking at right now, what they're going to be trying to do?
Again, because they got a little bit of extra general fund revenue left over at the end of this year, the general fund part, they can work that out. $5 million isn't a big deal. It's the $60 million REIT. That's the big problem. And they have to figure out whether they need to make other general fund cuts so they can use general fund money to cover some of that, or if they can find some other source. The biggest one probably being the payroll tax. Do they want to change the way they're using that money again to cover this? So, we saw, the week before we got this bad news about the revenues, we saw the city council members all sort of bring in their earmarks. For all the things they want to deliver to their constituents, especially the 7 who are potentially running for re-election next year.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And now money is super, super tight. They were hoping, lobbying and hoping to be able to get a bunch of their earmarks into this budget. And now it's going to be very tough to get any of them. They are just going to be struggling to cover sustaining investments that they made in the past.
Right. And in terms of what's going to happen with this, folks, originally the council was looking to have their final vote on the budget on the 21st. Now that's looking more like the 28th, so after Thanksgiving there, which doesn't always happen, but this is something the council is dealing with. The chair's balancing package, as the council budget chair, Teresa Mosqueda, has called it, that's going to be delayed by weeks. That's pushing things back. Again, public hearings are happening, a lot going on here. The 15th is when we're having a big public hearing on that, so make sure you're keeping an ear out for that. A lot of things happening here with the budget. Kevin, as always, I thank you for breaking that down. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the budget in our next segment here, specifically Kshama Sawant's People's Budget. She unveils this every year. What impact does this truly have on council budget actions? We're going to talk about that on Now Hear This. Well, in case you missed it, Councilmember Kshama Sawant held a rally for her People's Budget over this past weekend up on Capitol Hill, touting especially a plan to increase the Jumpstart payroll tax, what she calls the Amazon tax, by $140 million. She wants funding for renter organizing, new tiny house villages, raises for human service workers, among other things. Councilmember Sawant spoke at the rally about her end goal, trying to build support for socialism.
We need a socialist society where all of us working people in the world can democratically together decide how to use the wealth of our society and go towards a sustainable and just economy and society, throughout the world.
Well, Kevin, these are messages we have heard before. Councilmember Sawant has organized a People's Budget movement since 2014. But I like to keep tabs on everything the council is doing here, and I think about the impact that Councilmember Sawant certainly had on the minimum wage issue when she came into office, and I just start wondering about this. What impact does this People's Budget truly have, especially in a year of such a down economy?
There's a good argument to be made that this year it's going to have very, very little effect on this.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's also competing against the Solidarity Budget, which seems to have a sort of a larger following.
Yeah.
Councilmember Sawant recently had a rally for the People's Budget. They had about 70 people from the looks of the video that they did there. I did a quick, count there, but it looked like about 70 people. They held it in a church, so she was literally preaching to the choir. She was preaching to to her own supporters. So I'm not sure anybody outside of that little group is paying any attention to it at all.
Well, it's a question of money at a certain point.
Yeah.
I mean, how much money the city has or doesn't have.
And the larger issue is it's probably going to have little effect because there's just no money, right?
Yeah.
She's arguing for a $140 million increase to the payroll tax, what she continues to call the Amazon tax.
Yes.
That's a non-starter, right? This isn't 2019. The progressive left took a big hit to its credibility in 2020, and last year's election showed, where the electorate is at on that.
Sure.
So, next year's elections for the 7 city council district positions, and those city council members who want to run for election are going to be extremely sensitive to what they propose for new taxes.
Right.
And also they've just set up a new task force to make recommendations about new progressive taxes. So, are they going to jump the gun and go, increase the payroll tax this year? And they also have to be sensitive to what the mayor might veto, right?
Right.
They've already, normally in this process, they finish it up right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And, they I think officially by law have to be done by like the end of the first week of December.
Yeah, they're pushing it a little bit
And
here.
so they've pushed out 1 week. So they've basically taken half of the buffer that they have to get this done. If the mayor vetoes it, then they're really stuck.
Yeah.
Then they're really stuck. But again, just thinking about the payroll tax, and the biggest payer of that by far is Amazon.
Right.
Amazon has been, where are they right now? They're moving positions out of Seattle. They've been doing that for a while. They just had a really bad quarter, and they've announced a hiring freeze. So the reality is, even if the city decided to tax Amazon at a higher rate, there's no guarantee that it's going to get more tax revenues from that. In fact, the city's already warning, that's another part of this revenue forecast warning they got, was that their forecasts for payroll taxes revenues are already high risk, right? And they were lower in the second quarter of this year than they were in the third quarter. They don't have, in the first quarter. They don't have the third quarter yet. They're hoping to get that real, in the next couple of weeks.
Right.
But so it's, the payroll tax revenues aren't, it's not turning into this huge windfall. It's really kind of a risky thing right now.
The city's in a bind, Amazon's in a bind, and when you tie the futures of these tech companies some of them are doing very well, some of them are having issues here. We're certainly seeing that from Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, so many different, these high-tech companies are having some big issues here at the end of the year, and I feel like all of that is going to have an impact on the city of Seattle and how it puts together its budget.
It will. It will absolutely have an impact, and we may this maybe another 2023, maybe another year where we see a budget adjustment mid-year. Yeah. If the revenues really go sour again.
That's going to be interesting to check out. And I wanted to check out another piece of our economy that I found very interesting. Just tracking these headlines coming out, they're kind of hiding behind all the election news, but this merger between Kroger and Albertsons, this would impact a majority of Seattleites. Albertsons runs Safeway and, wait for it, Albertsons. Kroger runs QFC and Fred Meyer. So last week, a King County judge temporarily blocked Albertsons from paying out a $4 billion dividend to shareholders. This was part of the merger deal, and there was a lawsuit from our state. Attorney General Bob Ferguson has joined other state attorneys general. The basic idea is this: paying out this dividend might leave Albertsons short on cash, while the merger, which could take several years if it's approved, and so is that going to mean closing stores, etc. And Kevin, I wanted to talk to you about this because I know you have a great aptitude for legal analysis, and I know you buy groceries. So what's going on with this one in your mind?
And I spent a little bit of time in the business world as well. So
true.
26 years. I learned a few things along. Yeah. This is a complicated situation. So Albertsons is sitting on a pile of cash.
Yeah.
But cash like that is rarely transferred in acquisitions.
Okay.
Because it's essentially just trading cash for cash, right? If you include it in the in the deal, then you increase the basically the purchase price for Albertsons, right? By that amount. And then at the end of the day, all you do is, basically increase the taxes you have to pay, right? Because the price for the whole thing is bigger. Yep. You're paying cash for cash, and it's kind of silly. So it's probably part of the acquisition deal that cash would be distributed as dividends to Albertsons shareholders prior to the acquisition. And then, that lower amount of cash on hand was reflected in the acquisition price. Mm-hmm. But that said, the Attorney General is rightly raising the point that distributing all of Albertsons' cash on hand to shareholders is not a good short-term move for the company, given the antitrust regulators' review could take months or maybe years, and they might not approve the deal in the end. Mm-hmm. So, that could potentially leave Albertsons really short of cash to run the business. If they're running at a deficit right now, that'd be a problem. They need some amount of cash around for, handling cash flow. If they have to pay some bills before revenues come in. Sure. But it's probably overblown because this is a business where the revenues are coming in steadily. There are people every single day at the grocery stores buying stuff, right? So they don't have irregular cash flow. The cash is coming in on a regular basis, right? Right. So
and we're going to learn a little bit more about that. Yeah, they have some earnings reports I know coming in this week.
Yeah, they've got both Albertsons and Kroger's have got their earnings report coming in either this week or next week. I haven't done a deep dive on their books yet, but we'll do more. We'll know more then about how they're doing financially. But consumer product companies, the ones that make a bunch of the products that we see in grocery stores, they've been seeing strong earnings. They're basically a lot of them are just as has been reported several times, they've been basically pocketing inflationary price increases like the old companies have been doing. But we don't know yet if that's been passed down to grocery and retail outlets. We just saw Amazon earnings, and their retail business lost money, right?
Right,
They got hit
right.
really, really hard. Grocery businesses are well known to be super low margin, right? What
Right,
they're
right.
charging is very close to the cost of the goods and plus cost of running the business, right?
Yep.
So this is not a super, if they make a lot of money, it's because it's a very large scale business,
Right,
right?
right.
Small scale groceries do not make a lot of money.
Right. I was just looking at this more deeply, Kevin, in terms of this, and it's a big merger, and you're right, it's very, very complicated. But it seemed like, from my take on it, if there was to be regulatory approval of this merger here, it would end up meaning that hundreds of locations are going to have to be sold, right? Because if it's not
Yeah.
antitrust, then they can't own these stores that are too close together or whatever else. Do you have a bigger idea of what the impact of this is going to be, end of the day?
It depends on the region of the
Yeah.
country that you're in.
Okay.
Right? There are parts of the country where Albertsons/Safeway and Kroger have no overlap at all.
Right, right.
And there are places like Washington State where there's enormous overlap.
Right.
We're talking Safeway, Albertsons, QFC, Fred Meyer.
Within blocks of each other. Yeah.
What's
Some
left?
cases. Yeah. Yeah.
What's left? Right.
Yeah.
So absolutely, there's going to be antitrust regulators looking at what a merged company would have to divest. These antitrust things are judged based on what's called market power.
Okay.
Right? Does a company have market power? And by market power, they mean if a company raises prices, do its competitors react? Right.
Okay.
That's the acid test there. If you ask that about QFC, if you ask that about Safeway right now, the answer is absolutely yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Both of the companies involved in this merger have market power in the Seattle area.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
Either one of them doing an acquisition would get a lot of antitrust scrutiny. Combining the two of them, if you combine the two of them, what's left? What other grocery stores are left in the area? Well, you got a couple Whole Foods.
Yeah, your Met Market here and there. Yeah.
You got a Met Market here and there. You got a couple mom and pop shops.
Yeah.
Are there any Red Apples left?
Yeah, right.
A couple Red Apples left.
But
that's about it. That's about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
So
do they have the money to jump in and purchase these stores, those smaller companies? That's
and would they even want to?
Yeah,
Would they even want to?
Right. Well, we're going to find out a lot more about this coming up on Thursday when this case is back in court. It looks like Superior Court Judge Ken Schubert is scheduled to actually closely review the arguments in this case and see if this payment is really going to be blocked or not from Albertsons. It's $4 billion. But thank you, Kevin, for all those different pieces we broke down there. I want to talk about something very interesting coming up. Kevin wrote a piece about the impact of black teachers on black students. It's from something he wrote for the South Seattle Emerald. So a gem to uncover here on What's Next. Kevin, I wanted to draw our listeners' attention to this piece you wrote for the South Seattle Emerald about having black teachers, how that's been a positive impact on black students. Started with a project in Tennessee in the 1990s called STAR. Student Teacher Achievement Ratio is the acronym there. And yes, the study found that smaller class sizes make a big difference in elementary school. But it's also held a lot more data that I thought was really fascinating about these kids all the way through college. Can you break down this thing for us?
Project STAR was from the 1990s, and it looked at the effect of class size on student performance. They randomly assigned students to classrooms and teachers, some larger classrooms, some smaller teachers, and then gathered data in the short term and in the long term about how the students did. It turns out that the data they collected from this experiment it's been a gold mine for other kinds of educational studies.
Yeah.
They also found, as part of Project STAR, that black students assigned to a black teacher at some point in primary school, didn't have to be sort of all the way through, but if a black student in primary school at any point had a black teacher, they did better on end-of-year achievement tests. So that was a short-term measure.
Okay.
But there was very recently a new study that looked at the long-term effects of an elementary school student having a black elementary school student having a black teacher.
Yeah.
And they found that black students who had at least one black teacher in primary school were 19% more likely to graduate from high school and 13% more likely to enroll in college than black students who did not have a black teacher. And they also found that it had no impact either way on white students. So why was this effect for black students? Well, that's a really good question. And the researchers didn't have a definitive answer. They've got a bunch of hypotheses. They ruled out a couple things first. They said, look, were the black teachers more experienced than the white teachers? And they looked at that and said, no, they controlled for that. That's not it.
Okay.
Were the black teachers more skilled at teaching black students? possibly that could be part of it. Is there some kind of a role model effect going on where a black student say, oh, okay, well, I see a black teacher, somebody with a college degree.
Yeah.
That's sort of proof to me that I could go get a college degree. That's
And
something
do this,
that's
right.
available to me. There's a great policy insight from this, which is, ensuring that black primary school students get a black teacher at some point
Right.
increases high school completion and college enrollment
Makes
for those
sense.
students. Right. So that's just as a policy insight, that's super, super important. But now the hard part, and the researchers spend some time talking about this, is like, what do you do with that insight?
Right.
And potentially, it makes you look a little differently at things we did in the past. Now, in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, there was a lot of effort into integrating schools.
Yeah.
Right.
Happened in Seattle.
Mainly integrating students, not really integrating teachers.
Okay.
Right. So a lot of the black teachers remained in the traditionally black schools, but the students were moved across that. So one of the things you have to ask at that point is, okay, so did forced integration of students, which clearly gave a bunch of black students better access to better resource schools, better funded schools that had more educational opportunities, and more diversity of classes. So many, many benefits from that. But did it reduce the number of black students who actually had black teachers?
Yeah, right.
So, two things. One, we have to wonder, like, okay, did we actually make a part of this worse? A lot of other things get better with integration. And I'm no way saying integrating schools is bad. Yeah. But there's this unintended consequence that came out of it as well.
Interesting.
And we also learned, it's not enough to integrate students. You actually have to integrate teachers
have
as well,
to be there too.
Right?
Yeah.
But then this other policy sort of question that comes out of this is, well, if we encourage more black people to become teachers, we know teachers are paid poorly.
Yeah, right.
Have we just widened this huge racial pay gap that already exists? Right. We know there's enormous amounts of evidence that show that black men and black women get paid less than their white counterparts.
I see.
So, and we know the teachers are paid poorly. So if we encourage more black college graduates to become teachers, that's going to be great for a bunch of students. But are we going to unintentionally widen the pay gap, the racial pay gap, by doing that? So it's like, okay, that's so, and obviously we need to pay teachers better.
Of course, right.
Right.
Been known for a while.
We've known it for a long while. If you go back, I was reading a study that recently about this. In the 1970s, mid 1970s, there really wasn't a pay gap for students versus other careers. It's since then that this has been created, and it's gotten worse every decade since then. We need to go fix them. Yeah. Right? So that issues like this don't come up. Right.
Yeah. Wow. This is so many different issues come to the fore when you bring up an issue like this, Kevin. And I thank you very much. Great piece in the South Seattle Emerald. Make sure you check it out, people, about the STAR program. But Kevin, it's time to wrap up. A Zen question of the day for you. Do you feel energized when election results start coming in, or exhausted? Some thoughts.
Well, you know me, I'm the wordy and nerdy guy. So I've got my spreadsheet ready. Right.
Ready to rock. Okay.
I've been, one of my pet projects on the side has been watching the incoming return date every day to see if it has any predictability, right? Can I tell early on how this race is going to go? Anything from, do the ages of
I see. That
tell you something
data.
about this, or what the actual participation is going to be, all that stuff. And it's tough but I got my spreadsheet. I'm collecting the data every single day. I go scrape data from the King County election site every day and plug it in there so I can, and I've shared with you, some of the graphs I've done on that.
Yeah.
I am all set with my spreadsheet for tonight. So as soon as at 8:15, when the first drop comes, to just go plug in that data.
I love it.
And see what pops out.
I love it. And seeing that we're on a permanent political cycle, I think it's safe to say Kevin is always energized about the election. So thank you, sir. As always.
I'm always energized about data.
You got it, man.
Data, not so much. Data wins. Data and I get energized.
Data wins. Well, thank you, Kevin. And thanks to everybody listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. The podcast is on all the major platforms. Look for Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon and show your support. Thanks very much. Thanks also for watching on Converge. We'll see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2022.